After 23 years with the state police and my recent promotion to commissioner, I needed somewhere to decompress from the constant pressure. The mountain cabin seemed perfect when I found it last spring. Nestled among tall pines with a view of the lake, it represented everything my daily life was not: quiet, peaceful, and most importantly, free from regulations and bureaucracy. I had done my research thoroughly before purchasing. This particular area had no homeowners association, which was a deliberate choice. My days were filled with rules, procedures, and protocols. My retreat would have none of that. Just me, the woods, and simple living on weekends and holidays. The cabin itself was modest but solidly built. 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a wraparound porch where I could watch the sun set behind the mountains. The previous owner had maintained it well, and I planned to continue that tradition on my own terms and timeline. The first weekend after the closing was pure bliss. I spent hours simply sitting on the porch, listening to nature instead of police radios. The constant tension in my shoulders began to release for the first time in years. This would be my sanctuary from the demands of leading a statewide law enforcement agency. It was my third weekend at the cabin when the first strange notice appeared. A bright orange paper tucked under my door with official-looking letterhead reading, Mountain Lake's HOA Violation Notice. It cited me for unauthorized exterior color and non-compliant landscape maintenance, with a fine of $300 due within 15 days. I read it twice, confusion turning to suspicion. There was no HOA here. I had confirmed this with my real estate agent, the title company, and county records. My property deed contained no covenants or restrictions. Someone had made a mistake, or something more concerning was happening. I called my neighbor 2 cabins down, a retired teacher named Bill who had lived here for over a decade. Mountain Lake's HOA? Never heard of them, Bill said firmly. There is no HOA up here. Never has been, though come to think of it, I got some strange notice last month about my shed. I just threw it away. Over the next 2 weeks, 2 more notices appeared, each with increasing fine amounts and more threatening language. I collected them carefully, noting the lack of any legitimate contact information beyond a P.O. box and an email address. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was enjoying coffee on my porch, the early sun warming the wooden boards beneath my bare feet. 3 black SUVs came roaring up my long driveway, kicking up dust and scattering birds from nearby trees. They parked in a formation that blocked any vehicle from leaving. 6 individuals stepped out wearing matching dark blue uniforms with patches reading HOA Enforcement above badges that resembled law enforcement shields. They moved with practiced coordination that immediately triggered my professional assessment. These people were trying very hard to appear as legitimate authorities. Their leader, a tall woman with sharp features and cold eyes, strode toward me with purpose, flanked by 2 men with clipboards. "Mr. Lawson, I am Director Mercer with Mountain Lake's HOA Enforcement. You have failed to respond to multiple violation notices. We are here to conduct a full property assessment and issue final compliance orders." I stood slowly, keeping my tone neutral. There is no HOA that has jurisdiction over this property. I would like to see your identification and documentation of authority. Her smile never reached her eyes. Our authority is established in the community covenants. Your property is absolutely within our jurisdiction, regardless of what you might believe. Before I could respond, the team began fanning out across my property. 2 began measuring the distance from my cabin to the property line. Another photographed my woodpile and shed. When I stepped forward to stop them, the largest man moved to physically block my path. Interfering with HOA officials during an inspection is grounds for immediate punitive action, Director Mercer stated coldly. I suggest you cooperate fully. In that moment, my retreat transformed into a battlefield of authority and rights. These people were trespassing, but they behaved with the absolute confidence of those who had done this before and succeeded. I watched as they pushed past me onto my property, claiming jurisdiction they legally did not possess. After the self-proclaimed HOA enforcement team finally left, leaving behind multiple citations totaling over $2,000 in fines, I transformed from relaxed cabin owner to investigator. 20 years of law enforcement work had trained me to recognize when something was fundamentally wrong. This situation triggered every professional instinct I possessed. I cleared my dining table and began organizing what I knew. The citations used convincing legal language and formatting that would intimidate most homeowners. They cited specific bylaw numbers and covenant restrictions that sounded legitimate to the untrained ear. The letterhead included a professional logo and official-looking seal. My first call was to the county record's office. The clerk confirmed what I already knew. No homeowners association was registered for this area. No covenants or restrictions appeared on any of the property deeds along the lakefront or surrounding mountain properties. We have received several inquiries about this in recent months, the clerk admitted. Is this about Mountain Lake's HOA by any chance? I confirmed it was, and she sighed audibly. They are not registered with the county. Whatever they are doing has no legal standing that we can find in our records. Next, I systematically contacted every cabin owner within 5 miles of my property. A disturbing pattern emerged quickly. 17 owners had received similar notices over the past 8 months. 4 had already sold their properties at significantly below market value after escalating harassment. 3 others were considering selling rather than deal with the mounting pressure and threats of legal action. Martin Dover, whose cabin was closest to the lake, shared his experience. They said my dock violated shoreline regulations and threatened daily fines of $500. When I questioned them, they brought 3 people in uniforms to my door. One mentioned that his brother worked for the county sheriff, and they could make things very difficult for me. The common thread was clear, isolated properties, many owned by retirees or used as vacation homes by people who lived far away. Perfect targets for intimidation. I traced the P.O. box listed on the citations to a small office complex 30 miles away. The following day, I drove there in my personal vehicle. The supposed headquarters of Mountain Lake's HOA was nothing but an empty storefront with a mail slot and a printout of office hours taped to the door. No furniture, no staff, just an empty space with a professionally printed sign in the window. The neighboring business owner, a friendly woman who ran a small accounting firm, provided the final piece. Oh, they are never actually here. A woman in expensive clothes collects the mail once a week. She drives a white Range Rover with custom plates. Back at my cabin, I carefully started the process of identifying the perpetrators. Using my law enforcement databases properly and with legitimate investigative purpose, I ran background checks on the names I had gathered from neighbors. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Director Mercer was actually Christine Westfield, who had changed her name 5 years ago. She had been involved in 3 civil suits related to real estate fraud, all settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. 2 of her enforcement officers had criminal records for intimidation and fraud. One had an outstanding warrant for impersonating a building inspector in a neighboring state. The final confirmation came when I discovered property records showing that a company called Mountain Vista Development had been systematically purchasing the cabins sold by intimidated owners. The company's principal investor was none other than Christine Westfield, operating under her maiden name. County planning documents revealed their ultimate goal: a luxury resort and golf community planned for exactly where our cabins now stood. The location had previously been denied permits due to the existing private properties. Rather than pay fair market value, Westfield had created an elaborate scheme to force owners out through fraudulent means. As I placed the final document in my growing evidence file, the reality became crystal clear. This was not merely an annoying neighbor dispute or misunderstanding about property rights. This was an organized criminal enterprise using intimidation, fraud, and impersonation of authority figures to steal property from legitimate owners. What began as an invasion of my weekend retreat had uncovered a conspiracy targeting dozens of innocent property owners who lacked my resources and training to fight back. These people had picked the wrong cabin to target. They had no idea they were attempting to defraud the commissioner of the state police, and I was now fully committed to shutting down their operation permanently. 3 days after my initial confrontation with the fake HOA team, they returned with reinforcements. From my kitchen window, I watched 6 individuals in their mock official uniforms exit 3 vehicles and fan out across my property with military-like precision. Their coordinated movements suggested practice and planning. Director Mercer, now identified in my notes as Christine Westfield, approached my front door with a clipboard and an air of absolute authority. 2 men flanked her, one carrying surveying equipment and the other a camera with a telephoto lens. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mr. Lawson," she began without greeting, "we are conducting a formal measurement assessment today. Our previous citations have been ignored, so we are proceeding with documentation for legal action." I adopted a concerned expression, deliberately masking my law enforcement training. "I do not understand what authority you have to be on my property. There is no HOA here." She smiled thinly. "Your property falls under Mountain Lake's Community Covenant, established in 1997 and binding on all parcels in this development. Your ignorance of this fact does not nullify your obligations." A complete fabrication, but delivered with practiced confidence that would convince most people. "What exactly are these violations you claim exist?" I asked, feigning confusion while activating the recording device in my pocket. For the next 30 minutes, I followed them around my property as they conducted their elaborate theater of authority. They measured setbacks from imaginary boundaries. They photographed my cabin from multiple angles. They placed wooden stakes with orange flags at specific points, marking supposed infractions. "Your shed is 7 feet inside the green belt boundary," the surveyor announced, consulting a map that I could see had been recently printed rather than an official document. "That is a clear violation of Section 12.3 of the Covenant. And these trees need to be removed," added another team member, marking 3 mature pines with orange tape. "They exceed the height restriction and block community views." Westfield documented everything with exaggerated thoroughness, explaining each violation, in official terminology designed to overwhelm and intimidate. I asked strategic questions that revealed their limited knowledge of actual property law, while appearing increasingly worried. "The fines now total $4,700, Westfield informed me with satisfaction. "Additionally, we will be filing a property lien notice with the county if compliance is not initiated within 7 days." As they prepared to leave, one of the men accidentally backed into my handcrafted mailbox, knocking it completely off its post. He offered a cursory sorry about that without sincerity or offer to repair the damage. The message was clear: cooperation or consequences. "I will need to think about this," I told Westfield, projecting defeat in my voice. "This is a significant amount of money." She handed me a thick envelope. "These are the formal compliance documents. We expect your signature by our next visit. Otherwise, we begin the property lien process." As their vehicles pulled away, I retrieved my hidden camera from beneath the porch eave, one of 3 I had installed after their first visit. Every moment of their trespassing and intimidation had been clearly recorded. From my kitchen window, I watched with mounting anger as their convoy stopped at my neighbor's cabin. Mr. Grantham was a 78-year-old widower who had built his modest retirement home here 5 years ago. He sat on his front porch in a rocking chair as the team surrounded him. I grabbed my binoculars for a clearer view. Westfield towered over the seated elderly man, gesturing emphatically at documents while 2 men positioned themselves to block any retreat into his house. Even from this distance, I could see the confusion and fear on Mr. Grantham's weathered face. For 15 minutes, they applied pressure until his resistance visibly crumbled. His shoulders slumped in defeat as he took the pen they offered. His hand trembled as he signed whatever documents they had presented. The team members exchanged satisfied glances before returning to their vehicles. This was no longer just about protecting my property. They were systematically targeting the vulnerable and elderly with practiced intimidation tactics. Their confidence suggested success with this approach many times before. As I watched Mr. Grantham sitting alone on his porch, papers still clutched in his hand, I made a decision. This predatory scheme had to be stopped completely and permanently. These people had no idea who they were dealing with, and it was time to build a case that would end their operation for good. My dining table transformed into command central, case files stacked methodically just as they would be at state police headquarters. 23 years of law enforcement experience had prepared me for this moment, though I never expected to apply those skills to protect my own property and community. First, I needed to establish jurisdiction and violations. County land records, obtained officially through proper channels, confirmed what I knew: no legitimate HOA had legal standing in our area. The Mountain Lakes HOA quite simply did not exist as a legal entity. Documents from the Secretary of State's office revealed no registered business under that name, no filed covenants, and no legal authority to enforce rules or collect fines. I created a detailed timeline of every interaction, documented with precision. Each fraudulent citation was cataloged, photographed, and added to the growing evidence file. The recorded videos of trespassing and intimidation were transferred to secure storage, with backup copies created. My neighbor Bill helped coordinate a community meeting at his cabin, carefully keeping it quiet to avoid alerting Westfield and her team. 17 property owners gathered, each with their own story of intimidation. Mrs. Donovan, a retired school teacher, brought 5 years of escalating notices. They started with small things: a fine for my garden being too visible from the road. Then it became structural issues with my deck. The fines grew from hundreds to thousands. The Hendersons shared photographs of damaged property tire tracks through their garden, broken window screens, a storage shed door mysteriously broken open. Always after we refused to pay or questioned their authority, Mr. Henderson explained. Each story added another piece to the pattern. Together, They created a comprehensive victim profile spanning nearly 6 years. This was no recent scheme, but a long-term criminal enterprise. Working through proper legal channels, I contacted the district attorney's office. Ada Margaret Chen listened carefully to my initial report. This crosses multiple jurisdictions and involves several criminal statutes, she noted. Fraud, criminal impersonation, extortion, and organized criminal activity. We need to build this case carefully. I coordinated with county officials to verify property rights and records. The planning department shared maps clearly showing our properties were not subject to any HOA or community covenants. The tax assessor confirmed that no HOA fees or dues had ever been recorded against our properties. A discreet request to a colleague in the white-collar crime division revealed Christine Westfield's history. She had faced civil suits in 3 counties for similar schemes, always settling privately before criminal charges could materialize. Her company, Mountain Vista Development, had been involved in 2 previous controversial resort developments where owners reported pressure tactics to sell. The most disturbing discovery came when we linked the fraudulent HOA to 4 properties that had been sold under duress. Each had been purchased by different shell companies that all traced back to Westfield's Development Corporation. County planning documents revealed her ultimate goal, a massive luxury resort requiring the acquisition of at least 30 existing private properties. Each day, I added more evidence to the case file. Testimonies were formally recorded. Documentation was organized and indexed professionally. The pieces aligned perfectly, revealing the full scope of the operation. Working with Ada Chen, we mapped out the criminal statutes violated by each action: impersonating officials, criminal fraud, extortion, conspiracy, organized criminal enterprise. The charges were substantial and backed by mounting evidence. This is one of the most organized property fraud schemes I have seen, Chen admitted. They created an elaborate fiction and backed it with intimidation tactics. I coordinated with the Real Estate Commission, which had received scattered complaints but never connected them to a single operation. The Consumer Protection Division provided additional reports that fit the pattern. The State Attorney General's office expressed interest in the broader implications of the case. Through official channels, I arranged a meeting with Sheriff Carlton of the county where my cabin was located. Initially skeptical, his demeanor changed dramatically as I presented the evidence. I had heard rumors about problems up at the lake, he admitted, but nothing concrete enough to investigate. This is comprehensive. Together, we developed an operation plan. State police resources would be utilized properly and legally. Local sheriff's deputies would provide jurisdictional authority. The district attorney's office would prepare warrants based on the substantial evidence already gathered. We need to catch them in the act, Sheriff Carlton noted. Get them documenting their own crimes. The strategy took shape. A carefully orchestrated sting operation centered at my cabin. We would allow Westfield and her team to return and document their criminal activity in real time, with law enforcement ready to intervene at the perfect moment. I contacted Mr. Grantham and other vulnerable neighbors, quietly advising them to avoid any further interaction with the fake HOA team. Help is coming, I assured them. Please be patient a little longer. As I placed the final affidavit in the case folder, I felt a grim satisfaction. The trap was set. These criminals had targeted the wrong person and the wrong community. Their elaborate scheme was about to collapse completely. The next time Christine Westfield and her fake enforcement team visited my cabin, they would find much more than an intimidated property owner. They would find justice waiting for them, meticulously planned and inescapable. Morning fog clung to the trees as I sipped coffee on my porch, the serenity of the scene belying the carefully orchestrated trap about to be sprung. Over the past 3 days, unmarked police vehicles had positioned themselves discreetly along forest access roads surrounding my property. To any casual observer, nothing appeared unusual about the quiet mountain morning. Inside my cabin, state-sanctioned recording equipment captured every angle of my property. Microphones had been professionally placed to document any conversation. Sheriff Carlton, after reviewing all evidence, had obtained proper warrants covering every aspect of our operation. "All units in position," came the quiet confirmation through my concealed earpiece. "Roadblock teams standing by." The sheriff himself was stationed in an unmarked vehicle half a mile down my driveway with 4 deputies. State police tactical units waited just out of sight. Everything was in place, professionally coordinated as any major law enforcement operation. "Remember," Ada Chen had instructed during our final briefing, "we need them to clearly demonstrate their fraudulent claims and intimidation tactics. Let them fully incriminate themselves before the takedown." At precisely 9:15 a.m., right on schedule, the rumble of approaching vehicles broke the morning quiet. The familiar convoy of black SUVs appeared, kicking up dust as they approached more aggressively than ever before. Through hidden microphones, I could hear Westfield instructing her team. "If he refuses to sign over the easement today, proceed with the lien notification and property seizure warning. Make it clear that resistance means immediate legal action." 6 team members exited the vehicles in their fake uniforms, Westfield leading with a leather portfolio and confident stride. Their expressions showed none of the hesitation or caution that might come with legitimate authority. This was the confidence of predators who believed their prey was cornered. I opened the door before they knocked, projecting the defeated demeanor of someone ready to capitulate. "Good morning," I said quietly. "I have been expecting you." "Mr. Lawson," Westfield nodded curtly. "We need to finalize our business today. May we come inside?" I gestured them in, noting how 3 team members immediately began photographing my property again, while the others followed Westfield into my cabin. Their actions were methodical, practiced, the movements of a team that had performed this intimidation many times. At my dining table, Westfield opened her portfolio and removed an official-looking document with multiple colored pages. "Your continued noncompliance has forced us to prepare property lien documents," she began, her voice carrying perfectly for the hidden microphones. "Your fines now total $7,300, with additional penalties accruing daily." I sat quietly, allowing her to continue her fraudulent presentation. Her associate placed another document before me. "Alternatively," she continued with a thin smile, "Mountain Vista Developments is prepared to purchase your property today for this amount." She slid a purchase offer across the table. The price was 30% below market value. "And if I refuse both options?" I asked, making sure to clarify their threats for the recording. Westfield's expression hardened. "Then by end of business today, a property lien will be filed with the county. Your utilities will be disconnected for code violations, and we will begin civil proceedings that will cost you significantly more than the current fines." Her associate leaned forward. "Nobody wins fighting the HOA, Mr. Lawson. Everyone eventually pays or sells. Those are the only options." The threats were explicit now, perfect for our case. Westfield pushed the sales document toward me. "This offer expires when we leave today. It is the simplest solution for everyone. I nodded slowly, appearing to consider their offer. I understand, you have been very persuasive. Westfield smiled with satisfaction. I am glad you are being reasonable. Just sign here and all your problems disappear. As she finished her practice speech and pushed papers toward me, I calmly reached into my jacket. The confidence drained from her face as I withdrew not a pen, but my state police commissioner identification and badge. Actually, I stated clearly for the recording, I believe there has been a misunderstanding about who holds jurisdiction here. The shock on their faces was immediate and profound. Westfield froze mid-sentence, her practiced composure cracking instantly. I am Commissioner James Lawson of the State Police, I continued calmly, and you are all currently participating in multiple felonies, including criminal impersonation, fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. One of her associates took a step toward the door, but I raised my hand. I would advise against any sudden movements. This property is currently surrounded by law enforcement officers with a warrant for your arrest. In that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. Their false authority evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that they had walked into a meticulously planned law enforcement operation. Westfield attempted to recover, her voice suddenly less confident. This is a misunderstanding. We represent a legitimate homeowners association with proper authority. I smiled without warmth. No, Ms. Westfield, or should I say Ms. Christine Mercer, you represent no legal entity. There is no Mountain Lakes HOA registered with the state or county. What you do represent is a criminal enterprise that has victimized homeowners across 3 counties, and today, that enterprise ends. Stunned silence filled my cabin. Westfield and her team stood frozen, the sudden revelation destroying their carefully constructed facade of authority. Through my earpiece, I heard Sheriff Carlton giving the signal to move in. You have no idea what you are talking about, Westfield finally managed, though her voice had lost its commanding edge. We have completely legal standing, too. The sound of vehicles approaching cut her off. Through the windows, emergency lights became visible as marked and unmarked law enforcement vehicles surrounded the property. One of Westfield's associates moved toward the window, his face paling. Nobody move, I instructed calmly. Place your hands where they can be seen. The front door opened as Sheriff Carlton entered, followed by 2 deputies in full uniform. Simultaneously, the back door was secured by state police officers. The operation unfolded with textbook precision. Christine Westfield, you and your associates are under arrest, Sheriff Carlton announced formally. You face charges of criminal impersonation of authority figures, extortion, fraud, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to commit organized criminal activity. As the Miranda rights were read, badges emerged from jackets and unmarked police vehicles activated their emergency lights outside. The fake enforcement team stood in perfect tableau of shock as real officers methodically secured the scene. 2 deputies began photographing all documents on the table, the fraudulent fines, the predatory purchase offer, the fake lien threats. Everything was carefully documented as evidence. This is outrageous, Westfield attempted, though her voice lacked conviction. I demand to speak with my attorney immediately. That is certainly your right, I replied evenly. You will have that opportunity at the station. As the first of her team members were being escorted to patrol vehicles, a luxury white Range Rover with custom plates pulled up my driveway. Karen Westfield herself was arriving to check on her team's progress, walking directly into our operation. Her designer heels stopped short on my gravel driveway as she absorbed the scene, her team in handcuffs, law enforcement cataloging evidence, her enterprise collapsing before her eyes. For a moment, she appeared ready to flee, but patrol cars had already moved to block any escape route. Sheriff Carlton approached her. "Karen Westfield, I have a warrant for your arrest as well." Her practiced authority morphed instantly to indignation and legal threats. "This is a complete misunderstanding. I am a legitimate businesswoman and developer. Whatever you think is happening here is simply not accurate." I stepped onto the porch, still wearing my badge visibly. "Ms. Westfield, we have been building this case for weeks. We have documented every aspect of your operation." Her eyes narrowed as she registered who I was. "Commissioner Lawson, I had no idea this was your property. There has clearly been a miscommunication among my staff." I silently placed the evidence binder before her testimonies from 17 property owners, fraudulent documents bearing her signature, recordings of explicit threats, the falsified business filings. With each page I turned, her face drained further of color. "We have statements from all of your victims," I explained calmly. "We have documented your pattern of fraud across 3 counties. We have recorded your team making explicit threats and impersonating officials. The shell companies all trace back to you. The fraudulent HOA documents all bear your signature, Ms. Westfield." For once, her composure completely failed her. No clever words remained as officers escorted her to the waiting transport vehicle. Her final glare in my direction contained pure hatred, but the power she had wielded through intimidation had evaporated completely. Ada Chen supervised the collection of all evidence, ensuring proper procedure was followed meticulously. "This is textbook organized criminal enterprise," she noted. "The documentation is impeccable." For the next 2 hours, law enforcement processed the scene. Computers and phones were confiscated from the SUVs. Documents were carefully cataloged. Statements were taken. As the convoy of police vehicles departed with their suspects, I stood on my porch watching them disappear down the driveway. The mountain air seemed cleaner somehow, the forest quieter. Justice had come to a place where intimidation and fraud had operated unchecked for too long. Sheriff Carlton remained behind briefly. "We will need your formal statement downtown," he said. "But I wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention. They have been operating here for years, but no one could quite piece it together." I nodded. Sometimes justice requires the right person being in the wrong place at precisely the right moment. 6 months later, my cabin porch hosted a very different gathering. Neighbors stood together not in fear but celebration as County Commissioner Barrett announced new regulations specifically designed to prevent fraudulent property schemes. "The Westfield case exposed vulnerabilities in our system," he addressed the assembled homeowners. "These new protective measures ensure that no false authority can ever again prey upon property owners in our county." The spring air carried the scent of pine and fresh coffee as community members applauded. The court case against Westfield and her associates had concluded with satisfying finality just 2 weeks earlier. Karen Westfield received 7 years for organized criminal enterprise, with her associates receiving sentences appropriate to their involvement levels. Most satisfying was the restitution order. The court had seized Westfield's assets and those of her development company, creating a fund to compensate affected homeowners. Properties acquired through intimidation were returned to original owners when possible, or the owners were compensated at full market value. Mr. Grantham stood beside me, his confidence restored. The case had transformed him from victim to advocate. He had testified powerfully at the trial, his detailed account of intimidation helping secure the conviction. "I never thought I would see justice like this," he told me, gesturing to his newly repaired porch railing. Community volunteers had helped restore damage done to properties by Westfield's team. "I was ready to give up my home. Now it feels truly mine again." After the county officials departed, the gathering shifted to a community celebration. Our newly formed Mountain Property Alliance, deliberately not called an HOA, stood as everything Westfield's organization was not: voluntary, transparent, and focused on mutual support rather than control. "The difference," explained Bill as he grilled burgers for the group, "is that we come together by choice, not coercion. We help each other because we want to, not because some regulation forces us to." The Alliance had already organized road maintenance, created an emergency communication system, and established a security watch rotation. All voluntary, all beneficial, and all without mandatory fees or threatened fines. Sarah Henderson approached with her young daughter. "The prosecutor told me they found documents indicating I was next on their target list," she said. "They had already prepared violation notices for my property, if you had not stopped them when you did." I nodded, understanding the implications. The investigation had revealed detailed plans to systematically target every property in our area. The luxury resort development plans had been discovered on Westfield's seized computer, showing how our homes would be bulldozed for golf courses and condominiums once acquired. The case now featured prominently in state police training materials on white-collar crime and community protection. I had personally overseen the development of a new curriculum, helping officers identify similar schemes. 3 other counties had already uncovered similar operations using our investigation as a template. As evening approached and neighbors departed with waves and genuine smiles, I finally settled into my Adirondack chair with the cup of coffee I had envisioned when purchasing this retreat. The sunset painted the mountains in amber light, peace restored not just to my property, but to our entire community. In the distance, I could see Mr. Grantham on his own porch, rocking contentedly in his chair, his property secure. The Hendersons' children played in their yard without fear of intimidation. Across the lake, the Donovans had begun building the dock they had always wanted but had been afraid to construct. My cabin stood as I had always intended: a sanctuary, now truly free from unwanted intrusion or fraudulent authority. Sometimes justice requires the right person being in the wrong place at precisely the right moment. In this case, Westfield and her team had unwittingly targeted the one person with both the training and resources to end their entire operation.